two key areas that stood out. The first, dynamic global illumination. Beautiful bounce lighting instantaneously.
I don't have to be constrained to do a game where the world has to be static, and I'm able to iterate a lot faster.
And we call this new system Lumen. And we're about to show you what it is capable of. But first, there was another area that we thought we could push forward, truly virtualized geometry. The artist wouldn't have to be concerned over poly counts, draw calls, or memory. We could directly use film quality assets and bring them straight into the engine.
And that's a big deal for artists. I just want to be able to import my ZBrush model, my photogrammetry scan, my CAD data without wasting any time optimizing, creating LODs, or even lowering the quality to make it hit frame rate.
In the end, that's what it's all about. Art that just works. And we call this new technology Nanite.
With arguably, because a lot of the ambitions that were sold by the engine were not CPU performant enough to make it worthwhile, and that's why you had a lot of games really struggling in those areas specifically. And I'd say if you were shipping like from 5.0 to like 5.3, you were actually having a lot of problems. Now is when you get to like 5.5 or 5.4 and above, you see a lot of the things that they actually initially advertised reaching a production level standpoint where their performance is a lot better. And that is a problem, obviously, I think from the Unreal Engine perspective. But a lot of the other stuff I do feel is developer priorities, design priorities, and not paying attention to things until it is dramatically too late. Especially like the whole I threw a ton of actors in a scene thing. You shouldn't be doing that if over time it's gonna let the game never have that performance be able to be recovered, like John was talking about. So but man, that this MGS thing, I think it's just really bad settings priorities, probably on both machines actually. PS5 probably base could also probably be running better in some areas.
Universal stutter. Digital Foundry's done a talk on this. Everyone's done a talk on this. And essentially all of the old school methods, light baking for world composition, which is now world partition, you couldn't do it anymore. Basically the entire industry's been pushing you to go to ray tracing, and only 25% of the market even had ray traced cards at the beginning of last year or the year before that. This engine has been tailored to not perform well, and it's not the games, it's not the developers, this is the engine. You can open the engine up, a blank scene, and I've done this in previous videos. I've compared it to Godot, I've compared it to Unreal Engine 4. You can take the same scene, go all the way back to Unreal Engine 4, export that same scene into UE5 and run it side by side on identical hardware, and UE5 will eat more memory, it will chew up more CPU cycles, and it will be heavier on your GPU. An opaque material with no changes, no normal maps, no reflections, side by side across both engines will chew up an extra 300 compute on the GPU for that material in UE5. It is what it is. It's just the truth. I hate to be that way. And this is coming from a person who loves UE5. I'm not bashing it, but when you love something, just like my children, you want the best for them. And you also got to call them out on their BS. And I'm sorry, but I'm calling Tim out on this BS. This is nonsense here. If you're going to throw developers under the bus, by the way, I just so happen to be one of those developers, then also state the truth here, Tim. You have 1.74 thousand PRs sitting against main right now by the very developers that you're pointing the finger at, that you're saying is the problem, waiting on fixes to be pulled into main. This is, at the end of the day, a shared responsibility. And the engine itself does have issues. We cannot pretend like it doesn't. And these engineers that are supposedly stepping in to help out, I hope you got a buku buttload of money. Because at the end of the day, it is extremely hard to get support unless you're willing to come out of your pocketbook for it.
What is up, guys? It is Dope Shay bringing you guys another video. In this one, we're going to be talking about Unreal Engine 5. We're going to be talking about this current generation of console gaming and just a lot of different things, because this has to be the most polarizing time in gaming that I've seen in a while, right? There's a lot that's happening in the gaming community, a lot of discussions around modern gaming, modern hardware, and stuff like that. But let's keep this focused on Unreal Engine 5, right? So recently, Tim Sweeney made a comment about Unreal Engine 5 games having poor performance, right? He says the primary reason why Unreal Engine 5 based games don't run smoothly on certain PCs or GPUs is the development process, right? And then he also says many developers begin developing games for high-end hardware and then optimize and test on lower spec devices in the final stages, right? And based off of what I know from other people who work in Unreal Engine 5, a lot of developers who have a lot of experience in Unreal Engine 5 and making games on there. And I put clips in the beginning of this video for a reason to show you their perspective, and I'll leave links in the description. This is a load of shit, right? You can't gaslight the development community and game devs and say, hey, it's your fault. And while I agree with the statement that there are some developers that develop games on high-end hardware and optimize and test on lower end specs, yeah, there are developers doing that, right? Like that's a reality. But also you need to hold yourself accountable, and you need to hold Epic Games accountable, because there's no reason why there's so that's not the sole reason why so many Unreal Engine 5 games perform so poorly on a lot of hardware, right? And you shouldn't gaslight them. You shouldn't gaslight gamers. Like I see a lot of these people that are gaslighting gamers. Well, hey, maybe you should buy better hardware, right? Like, come on. The majority of the people that play video games are playing on console, and they're playing on probably like recommended specs or below recommended specs, right? And we've seen this with Battlefield 6. Like DICE came out and say, hey, a lot of people are either playing at minimum specs or below minimum specs, right? So that's just the reality of where we're at in the gaming market. Not everybody is going to be able to buy a 4080, 4090, 5090, 5080, this high-end hardware, right? A lot of these pieces of hardware are very expensive, and in a lot of cases unnecessary. Not everybody needs high-end hardware, right? So that's the first thing I want to get out the way, right? And back to the console discussion, right? Console gamers are getting the brunt of this. I'm an owner of a PS5 and Xbox Series console, right? I also have a PC with a RTX 3090 in it and a 5800X 3D, right? So I have good hardware in my PC. I have the console. There are many games on console that look visually horrible. I'm talking about resolutions as low as 720p and 1080p with awful image quality, right? And to say that, hey, we just need better hardware. No, we need better optimization, not just from developers, but from Epic Games of Unreal Engine 5. Everybody knows that from 5.0 to 5.4 and 5.5, the engine doesn't perform well, and there's a lot of issues with Unreal Engine 5. And a lot of the promises that they made back in 2020 when they showed off that Unreal Engine demo hasn't panned out, right? You can't give developers a tool and say, hey, this is just gonna work, right? Turn on Lumen, turn on Nanite, it's just gonna work. And the reality is it doesn't. It doesn't just work. There's a lot of examples of this, right? Where you have a game that hits the market, right? And they're showing off all these new features in Unreal Engine 5, and it simply doesn't perform well. It's tanking performance. It's very resource intensive compared to previous versions of Unreal Engine, right? So for Tim Sweeney, right, to come out here, and there was also like another indie developer that came out and said something as well in regards to Synth Potato's tweet about he said, I'm so sick and tired of Unreal Engine 5 games run like crap, and he brings up examples, and he's linking Digital Foundry, and this indie dev is just coming out of nowhere and just saying, well, it's not Epic Games' fault, it's not Unreal Engine 5's fault, it's developers' fault. No, this is a shared responsibility between Epic Games and game developers in regards to making the engine as performant as it can be across a wide variety of hardware. And and this is gonna have a lot of games suffer to the point where there's people who are coming out and saying, hey, if a game says it's on Unreal Engine 5, I lose interest. My expectations is to the toilet. And do I think this is gonna impact the sales of a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games? I don't know. That's to be determined, right? But another thing I want to get to is just like this console generation has been the most lackluster generation I've seen. I mean, when we first got the specs of the PS5 and the Series X and Series S, I was like, yo, this is gonna change the way games are gonna be made. Games are gonna be so awesome. 8th gen was great for gaming. There were a lot of like visually and graphically impressive games that came out in 8th gen. Red Dead Redemption 2, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, God of War 2018. There's a lot of titles that you can point to. Um, Destiny, right? All running on different engines, right? But oh, Uncharted 4, right? Uncharted 4 looks amazing, right? And I'm like, dude, if you thought these games look great then, imagine what the games on PS5 and Xbox Series is going to be, right? And then having those games come over to PC, right? And optimizing your games across different platforms. And there's been such a huge disconnect between what we were sold and what was promised and the vision that Sony had for PS5 in that generation and what Epic wants to do with their engine and then Microsoft with DX12. And there's such a huge disconnect between that and the reality of what we have now that we're just stuck in this holding pattern of, okay, how long is it going to take for developers to understand that I don't want my games to look horribly. Like, yes, is your game graphically intensive? Yes. How much more graphically better is it versus 8th gen titles? I don't really know because it's like there's still 8th gen titles that are punching above their weight that look great compared to current gen titles. And you can't tell me you guys like there would be people out here that'll be like, hey, yeah, 9th gen titles are amazing and they're blown. No, like there's still 8th gen titles that look just as good or even better than current gen titles. And that's sad because you're pushing all these new features of dynamic lighting and ray tracing and path tracing and we have nanite and don't worry about polygon counts. But that does matter and you have to optimize your game. And we've seen a regression in a lot of areas. Like, yeah, are there more games running at 60 FPS on console? Yes, but there's also a lot of games that look visually horrible at that frame rate. And a lot of people are conceding. Well, let me even say a lot of people. There's a small amount of people who are like, you know what? I would rather sacrifice 60 FPS to have better visual quality and run the game at 30 FPS. And that tells you something, right? It's a compromise that they're willing to make, but the majority of people don't want to make that compromise. Sony has the data. When they announced the PS5 Pro, right? And they were talking about that console. They were like, yeah, the vast majority of people run their game at performance mode. No shit. People want better frame rates, right? But at the same time, they also want great visual quality. None of this smeary stuff. Like it feels like some of these games that I played on console. Perfect example of this. Final Fantasy 16, and this isn't an Unreal Engine 5 title, but there are other engines and other games from developers that are not running Unreal Engine 5 that suffer from some of the similar issues that you're seeing with Unreal Engine 5, right? Particularly with image quality on console and to a certain degree on PC, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm playing the game on performance mode, and the game looks like I took off my glasses, and it's just a blurry mess, and it looks disgusting. In that time, and it's not the fact that it just looks disgusting. There's moments where there's dips in FPS, and I'm like, did you guys even attempt to optimize your game to look well? What's going on here? What's happening here? And I'm sorry for going on this little rant, but I just don't like the gaslighting that Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney is doing to developers and not understanding that, hey, it's a shared responsibility between you the developer and Epic Games, right? And Wildlock Studio has a couple videos where he gives great perspective on this as well. And I'm gonna link in the description a lot of videos and articles. Even some people on Reddit, like they're like, man, the quality of some of these products that are coming out are just so poor. And you can't just say, hey, these developers are lazy, right? They're not doing enough optimization. Like, yes, there are some developers that need to optimize their game better, but then there's other developers that have no choice. Like, there's pressure from senior management and the publisher, investors and shareholders to get the game out without doing the proper optimization and spending the time to get the game to run well. Like, this is the reality. But then also you have a segment of the community. This is very unfortunate. There's a segment of the community that's like gaslighting gamers, right? Maybe you need better hardware. You need to get better hardware, right? The reality is the majority of people, one, they don't need the highest end graphics card and CPU, right? That shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't be telling somebody to say, hey, buy this $500 CPU, buy this, $1,500 GPU to be able to run games well. When it's like, no, a lot of these games are simply not as performant as they should be on modern hardware. And to gaslight gamers to say, hey, you need to get this, you need to get that. No, that's not the case. And the people who get it the worst are console gamers, because you have no choice but to either wait for a patch to come out or don't play the game, because in a lot of cases there's no amount of patches and fixes that's going to improve the game's performance and visual quality in a lot of cases. The only game I seen that had a performance mode that was subpar visually that actually improved over time was Horizon Forbidden West. When I played Forbidden West on performance mode, there was a lot of jagged edges. Like the visual quality was just off, right? The image quality was off. And then they finally fixed that game with patches. And I said, wow, like performance mode is actually very playable right now. And it's very impressive. But this isn't the reality for a lot of games. And the fact that there's so much discussion around this is very, very telling. But you also can't have these guys coming out. And I understand Tim Sweeney, like he's the CEO of Epic Games. He's gonna defend Unreal Engine 5 and point the finger at developers, right? But also, that's not gonna work out well for you, because there's gonna be a lot of developers that come out and say, you know what, we're gonna point the finger back at you and tell you what's wrong with your product and why, how you marketed your product at the beginning of the generation and the reality of where we're at right now doesn't match up. And there's a lot of evidence to prove this. Like I said, I have articles and videos in the description that of people who are much more knowledgeable about this. Me, I'm just giving my perspective as a gamer, right? Because it's frustrating to see what's happening to console gaming and even PC gaming to a certain extent, right? Like people who run like decent specs or below recommended or recommended specs, you're being gaslit and saying you need a card that supports frame gen and like, come on, man. Like you can't point the finger at the gamer and blame them and say spend more money, right? But then you also can't say, hey, like these developers, like they don't optimize and test their games. In a lot of cases, they don't have the opportunity to do so. And the ones that do have the opportunity to do so, shame on them. We know that, and we point that out. But then you also have these indie devs that are coming out against people like Synth Potato that point out the simple reality that, hey, like him, just like a lot of us, are tired of these UE5 games running like crap, right? And if there isn't a turnaround, a lot of these games are going to suffer in regards to sales. That's just the reality. But I'm more optimistic about the future of Unreal Engine 5 than pessimistic. And the reason is there's a lot of developers at the forefront who are bringing up these issues to Epic Games, who are trying to work alongside them to make the engine run better on a wide variety of hardware, right? So I'm optimistic to see what future titles on Unreal Engine 5, how they run, especially as there's newer iterations of Unreal Engine 5 coming out, 5.6, 5.7 whenever that drops. But there needs to be accountability on all sides. It's a shared responsibility. So let me know your thoughts. This is just a little rant. It spiraled into a rant, I guess. But let me know your thoughts. Make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe. I am out.